All right, I want to go over this idea of how it really is all about 1-4-5. It's blues, baby. So let's talk about that. If we're in C major, let's say, right? The 1, that's the tonic, right? Tonic is 1. Subdominant is 4, right? So there's our subdominant. Dominant is 5, G major. Okay, perfect. That's what's in a blues, right? You play 1, 4, 5. That's the progression. Our ear really likes those sounds. Now, what's the relative minor? Relative minor is 6 chord. So if I'm in C, we know relative minor is A. And it's basically a C major 7 with an A in the bass. You get A minor 7, A minor 9. So we know that 6 is related to 1. So let's say 6 is 1 in this case. This is why we call it relative minor, relative major. Now, what is the 6 of F major? Well, F major, 6 chord is D minor. Okay. Now, what is the relative major of G? E minor. So let's say that F major is relative to D minor. G major is the relative major of E minor. E minor being the relative minor, 6 chord. So that's what's in the center of the circle of fifths when you guys learn that. It's the minor keys inside. Now go watch There's No Such Thing as Minor 1, because that's most of the time a lot of these minor songs, not all of them, but they tend to be playing from the 6 chord. So if we're in C, like Summertime, it's from the 6, right? You can hear that as minor 1, but you should also realize that it's a 6 chord. Now let's think about the 5 chord, G7, right? Now the 5 chord is those notes, G, B, D, F. Let's rearrange some of those notes and do what's known as an inversion. In this case, first inversion, which would have the 3rd or the E in the bass, or is the lowest note in the voicing. Not E, why do I have that? That's incorrect. That should say B in the bass. Okay, let me save this before I forget. Okay, so if we do that, notice what we're playing. Well, you're playing basically the 7th triad in the scale, or in the diatonic scale, right? You put a G in the bass, it's a 5 chord, G7. So that's why my ear tends to hear the 7th note can be replaced kind of as a 5 chord, right? So 7 is like a 5 also. So now let's think of it all in the diatonics, harmony of the scale. So we have C major, D minor, E minor 7, F major, G7, A minor, B half. You're back at 1. So now let's simplify it with the 1-4-5 ideas. And what do you get? Well, 1 is 1, 2 is 4. Let's say D minor is the 6 of F. F is 4, so 2 is 4. E minor is the 6 of G that we found out, relative minor. 3 is the 5. 4 is 4, 5 is 5, 6 is 1, 7, B diminished, is 5. So, in my opinion, when I really heard this, I realized, wait a second, this is why it sounds so good when you minor 2-5 to the 2 or the 3. Like in Black Orpheus, or a bunch of different songs do this, right? You always minor 2-5 to the, if you're in C major, I can minor 2-5 to the 6, and that's how that song starts. Go watch the No Such Thing as Minor 1 video. We talk about all these songs. Point is you minor 2-5 to the 2. Okay, now this takes us to the next part. So we realize, let's go to secondary dominants. Or actually, let's jump to minor 2/5s. So minor 2/5-1, if you haven't watched this video, minor 2/5s is literally 7/3/6. So when we do B half diminished, we do B half diminished to A minor. That's what we end up doing. Well, what do you get? Well, you get this important secondary dominant. It's one of the most important secondary dominants, in my opinion. It's one of the first ones you should learn. So what happens when you do this? Well, you get B half, E7, A minor. So you replace the E minor with an E7, you make it a secondary dominant. Go watch that video. It talks in depth about what secondary dominants are. And what happens when you do that? Well, now you have the 5 of 6. So this really draws to that chord. You get that leading tone. This is where harmonic minor comes from, right? They tell you to play harmonic minor over that E7, right? Because it has the G sharp in it, which is flat 6. Go watch the flat 6 lecture. It's the money note. So minor 2/5s create one of the most important secondary dominants, which is dominant 3. Okay, now, if you go to the secondary dominant lecture, like I said, go watch this video. It gets really in depth and it goes through every single secondary dominant. So you have dominant 1. These are what I call diatonic secondary dominants. It even has songs that do those. So look, it has dominant 1 goes to F, 5 of 4. There's some tunes that go with it. Dominant 2 goes to 5. Dominant 3 goes to 6. That's the one we just did. Dominant 4 goes to flat 7 major or dominant. That's a different one. 5, this is not secondary dominant, it's just a dominant chord. I just included it. 6 dominant goes to 2. 7 dominant goes to 3. Now, go through that lecture. I don't want to jump into it too much, but that's what secondary dominants are. Now, secondary dominants are really important. Why? Well, because that's how you start to really get some really cool sounds and move keys. Okay, so go watch that lecture. Now, we have the minor 2/5s. That's what we're focusing on, because we were focusing on 6 chords, right? The minor, the 6, relative minor. So we just did 2/5 to relative minor, which is 2/5 to the 6, right? So 2/5. Now this is why you can alter the 3. You can get all those cool sounds, right? And even, usually you'll play E7 flat 9 is what they tell you to do, to play with the dominant chord on minor 2/5s. 7, 3. Well, why is it 3 dominant, 7 flat 9? Well, because that F is in the key of C. Watch. Let's go ahead and show note names real quick, so we can see what we're looking at. Now notice that G sharp is normally not in the key, right? So when you make these secondary dominants, that G sharp's normally not there, but now it is because of the secondary dominant. But now, since it's a G sharp dominant, you can play F, which is in the overall key of C, right? So now you get dominant 7, flat 9. That's why 5 chords on minor 2/5s are 5 dominant, flat 9, because it's in the key. So that's what's cool about it. It's 7, 3, 6. But you can also do 7, sharp 9, sharp 5, right? E. So you alter these secondary dominants. Now let's keep going before we jump too much into it. Let's do the other ones. Well, we know that D minor is the relative minor of F. F major. D minor is the relative minor. Okay, if that's the 6 in F, but that's the 2 in C. Remember, we're in C major. But why does it sound good when I do? It's because I made E minor E half diminished now. So I went from E minor to E minor 7 flat 5. I flatten that 5. Well, if you think of this as 7, 3, 6 in F, that B flat all of a sudden makes a lot of sense, right? That's just the subdominant. You're borrowing from the subdominant, just like you do when you do dominant 1. You put a B flat in the voicing, and that's borrowing from F. That's the 5 of F. It's blues, baby. You're borrowing from the 4 even when you do minor 2 5s. And these minor 2 5s go perfectly to the 2, perfectly to the 3, which is the 6 of G, which is the 5 chord. So that's why when you add an F sharp half diminished, now that makes sense because I'm borrowing from G. G has an F sharp, it's the 5 chord. Now I make it 7, 3, 6, and all of a sudden you have a minor 2 5 to the 3. And you know, remember, Cole Porter does this all the time. Tritone 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Right? It completes the cycle 5 version cycle. So you get tritone 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Now if I do that now, those secondary dominants, those are all dominant 3 chords, right? You can see in the lecture here, they're all dominant 3. From different perspectives, right? The whole idea of this is from the perspective of 1, 4, and 5, right? So now let's go to secondary dominants. Let's alter them. Let's alter these secondary dominants we have. Go watch this video. Now what happens when you alter them? Well, when you alter these exact secondary dominants, which came from these 7, 3, 6 minor 2 5s. Okay, now if I alter, notice how when I alter A7, I get all the right notes in C. I can play 7 flat 9, A7 flat 9, you get B flats. Well, that's not in C, that's in C minor though. Even if I alter it with a flat 5, that's E flat. That's C minor. What you'll notice is that when you start to alter the secondary dominants, all the notes that you change to alter them, so will fall inside the parallel minor. So in this case, remember we said we're in C. 7, 3, 6, right? 2, 5, 1, 2, 5 to the 3, 2, 5 to the 2, 7, 3, 6, right? Anytime I alter these dominant chords that I'm using, look at what happens. I'm using an E flat. This is all still inside C minor, right? If I learned this in my church gig, you'll see from the other video I talk about this. When you start to alter them, you see so all these secondary dominants, which we should learn where these minor 2 5s come, because that dominant 3 is very important. You don't play Mixolydian over it. That's what you'll see in that video. Go watch it. So over a tune like G Baby, you best be thinking the right perspective, because you're not just thinking Mixolydian from all these. They're not true 5 chords, right? They're dominants, but they're not 5 chords, right? Some of them they're secondary dominants. So some of them might be, 4 dominant, 3 dominant, which is learn how important 3 dominant is. So my point is, when you start to alter those secondary dominants, you get all those notes that you use to alter. All fall inside of. That's why these kinds of tunes sound so bluesy, right? So the idea is, it really is all about 1, 4, 5. That's what's crazy. Is that at the end of the day, it's blues, baby. So when you're learning these tunes and you realize how important these harmonies are, you start to realize that a tune like Black Orpheus, it's from the 6. And then you realize when I go to the second half, when I go, realize, oh, that sounds good because it's borrowing from the 4 chord. So go watch those videos. I'm kind of repeating myself, but it's important. You realize that this, minor 2/5 to the 2 is not random, right? It's not random. It's related to the 4. And the minor 2/5 to the 3 is not random. It's related to the 5. Both those keys are 1 cycle 5 away in each direction. One's left on the circle of fifths is counterclockwise, which is going in flat direction. You go from C, you add a B flat, it takes you to F. Now if I'm in C and I want to get to G, if I add a D7, right, dominant 2, you use that all the time as borrowing from the key of G, which is the 5. It's 1 sharp away. You add an F sharp. So each time, you'll notice when you minor 2/5 in those keys, you use those exact notes. Those are, so it starts to line up, and you start to realize, like, oh wow, it really is all about 1, 4, 5, And the way I hear it is, it's blues, right? So you can start to really think about these relationships and hear them. That's really the most important part. So I thought I'd just make this little video. Maybe that helps someone. I like the idea of, this 1 is 1, 2 is 4, 3 is 5. 7 is 5. That idea really kind of brings home this message of 1, 4, 5, and why our ears like the subdominant and dominant keys. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Hopefully this helps, and hopefully this makes sense. Give it a think, and go check out those other videos, because I'm kind of overlapping some of these ideas. I'm repeating some stuff, but I wanted to do this little lecture about 1, 4, 5 to really kind of show you how even when you're changing keys, those keys are related to 1, 4, and 5, right? So those minor 2/5s are not random. When you minor 2/5 to the 2, it's not random, right? You're borrowing from the subdominant via its 6. If that's a little easier to think about. Minor 2/5 via the 5/6, which is 3. So these chord progressions then start to make sense. So hope this helps, and let me know what you think.